Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsom, and I'm here to break down UFC Mexico, which goes down this weekend in Mexico City. It's a really good card, what looks like from top to bottom. Again, it's one of those fight night cards that won't be absolutely scattered with insane talent throughout it, but it's one of those fight cards that it's just going to deliver. You can feel it's going to deliver. I think it's going to be, again, there's some great fights. We've also got the altitude here as well in Mexico City, nearly 7,500 feet above sea level. So that's something that we've got to take into consideration as well. And look, from an entertainment perspective, if there is two fighters that haven't been training at elevation or they haven't acclimatized in the right way, then we could see really interesting late second rounds, third rounds where both fighters are tired and gasping for air. So everything from an entertainment perspective, I love these cards in Mexico. They always seem to deliver. And then there's that altitude that, again, plays a factor in every single fight. So that's also something to look out for as well. Now, just from the deep dive that I have done in the majority of the fighters on this card, it is always worth checking on Instagram. But I have seen that the majority of fighters have been in Mexico now for a couple of weeks. So again, they're not just turning up on fight week just because, you haven't got that time to acclimatize. They've been turning up at least a week before fight week. So they'll have been there. By the time they fight, they'll have been there at least 2 weeks. And they've had a week's worth of training at altitude as well, which will help the body, acclimatize to that 7,500 or near 7,500 feet above sea level altitude. So I'm hoping that the majority of fighters won't be too affected by the altitude, but still, even if you have been training and acclimatized yourself in the right way, there's still that chance that your body just absolutely, gives out on you from a cardio perspective when you're this high above sea level. So again, it's an interesting point, but one that is a factor for every single fight on the card. Now, just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, if you do want to jump into the action this weekend from a betting perspective, then make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. The long-term gamblers that like the full written breakdowns, just so they can understand where the professional handicapper, which is myself, is coming at in all angles when we are recommending a specific bet. We've got a fun gamblers section, so if you're somebody that likes the long shot parlays, fun parlays, you like to build your own parlays, or maybe you want pre-built parlays, we've got that section for you as well. And then, of course, we've got the section of the official bets, which is the bets where my money goes. So that's a section for those that just want to tail exactly what I'm betting on. And then included in all of our betting subscriptions, we've got Base AI, which is our UFC prediction software, which gives you a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every UFC fight every single week. Basically, I did really well last week, actually, in a week where I think, a lot of people were tripped up by a couple of the results, but basically I hit 10 out of those 13 fights correctly just from the straight win-loss prediction. So, again, a good week for Base AI. And again, everything is super affordable on the MMA Play 365 website, with our ethos being that we want you to make the money back from the money that you've spent with us with your subscription as quickly as possible so you can start profiting on top of your bets. That's all at MMAplay365.com. With the introduction out the way, with the promo out the way, let's get down to breaking some fights. And as always, we start in the main event, 5 rounds in the flyweight division between Brandon Moreno fighting at home against Steve Erceg. And I think this is a really, really good fight. I think it's going to be super competitive. I think it's going to be back and forth. Absolutely love the fact that it's 5 rounds as well, because if there isn't a finish, then we are going to see a back and forth 5 rounds between these two guys. I think both fighters are going to have the moments. I think both fighters have got real good qualities about them. Of course, Brandon Moreno is a previous UFC champion, multi-time UFC champion, and then Steve Erceg is a fighter that is, or at least looked on his way to becoming a UFC champion. So it's a really great fight, but I just want to start with that brief point I mentioned there. You notice that stutter in what I said, at least who we thought was going to be a future UFC champion. And the reason why I'm starting here is because of the betting line. Like, Brandon Moreno's a minus 200 favourite Erceg, I think at best can be had at like plus 175, but he's down as low as like plus 150 as well. Although I say down as low, like, honestly, when I looked into this fight, for some reason it wasn't on the Fight Odds website for quite a while, so I actually taped the fight before knowing what the odds was. And after I come out of tape, I was really conflicted to which side I actually really favoured to win this fight, to the point of where I thought, well, look, Brandon Moreno's a former champion. Brandon Moreno's fighting at home. Brandon Moreno is a fighter that I think, a lot of people can just absolutely trust because he's been around for a long time. So I thought to myself, well, look, if Brandon Moreno's like a minus 125 favourite, maybe minus 130 with Steve Erceg, plus 100, maybe plus 105, I thought that's probably where I could understand the betting lines being at, due to the fight being, in my opinion, will, in my opinion, be really close and competitive. But to see Brandon Moreno at minus 200 and Erceg anywhere between like plus 150 to plus 170, 75, I just think it's too wide. And what this comes down to, and again, I know I digressed a little bit, but I'm going back to this future UFC champion for Steve Erceg, because the fans affect the betting markets, because when money comes in, that changes the betting lines. The betting companies, the bookies, they move the odds depending on where the money's come in. But the thing is, like, people are just so quick to, make statements and then forget. Like, when Steve Erceg lost against Pantoja, Erceg was only 28. He'd only had, I think, 3 fights in the UFC, maybe 4. I'd have to double check that. But he'd not even been fighting in the UFC for a year. So Steve Erceg went in there against Pantoja, big underdog, and man, like, Erceg put a really good account of himself. He was lighting Pantoja up on the feet with his boxing. He was hitting takedowns against Pantoja. And again, that's something that pretty much no opponent against Pantoja really goes to the well at least too often to try and take him down, because Pantoja wants to be on the mat. Like, this is where he's better than everybody in the entire division. But Erceg was hitting double leg takedowns in the open mat against him. So I think Erceg gave a really good account of himself. And then when you look back on X after that fight, or Twitter, if that's what you still call it, everybody was like, okay, yeah, we expected Erceg to lose, but that was super close, 3-2 in rounds. We expect Erceg to be an absolute UFC champion, in the future with that type of performance, less than a year into his UFC career. And the sky was the limit for Erceg at that point. Then he goes in there in his next fight, big favourite against Kai Kara-France. I'm sure a lot of people had Erceg in parlays. And Kai Kara-France knocked him out in round 1. Now suddenly Erceg's nothing, and he fraud checked and all these sort of phrases that people use. And then from the betting perspective, now he's a plus 170 underdog against Brandon Moreno. Like, if you take that Kai Kara-France that fight out of the equation, and this is Erceg's first fight after fighting Pantoja, Erceg might be a favourite here. He obviously, it's impossible to know for 100%, but that type of performance against Pantoja, I'm telling you now, Erceg, there's no plus in front of Erceg's betting line if this fight happens straight after the Pantoja fight. So that round 1 knockout against Kai Kara-France has just changed the complete dynamic of, the public's perspective of Steve Erceg. And I disagree with it, because, look, Kai Kara-France has done this to a number of really good fighters in his career. He's a dangerous striker. He's got power for the division, and he's knocked people out in round 1 or, in his fights numerous times. And sometimes it's a really good fighter where you don't expect Kai Kara-France to do that well and perform against at least at that level, and he comes out there and sparks him. It's happened so many times. So for me personally, I'm not putting too much stock behind that one knockout. I still think Steve Erceg is, a legitimate fighter in the division with good qualities, with good skills. And when you match these up stylistically, like, for me, Erceg's got the better technical striking. Maybe Brandon Moreno's more explosive, maybe comes forward a little bit more aggressive. But from a straight kickboxing perspective, I think Steve Erceg's the better technical striker. Then when you come to the wrestling, I think the wrestling's actually quite close between the two. But then when you're watching Steve Erceg double leg Pantoja in the open mat in the middle of the cage, it's a bit like, well, Erceg's clearly got good wrestling as well. Like when Moreno gets takedowns, like, he can get takedowns, but they don't seem to be these explosive double legs in the center of the cage. The more, drive in. If you don't get that initial takedown, drive the opponents back to the cage and then look to chain wrestle and hit an MMA takedown off the cage. But again, the wrestling's close, but you kind of lean Erceg a little bit, at least in my opinion. Then when you get to the straight grappling, the grappling's close as well. I just genuinely believe whichever one of these fighters is on top of the other, I think the grappling's good enough from either fighter to be able to get back up to the feet. I don't think that if Steve Erceg takes Moreno down, I don't think Erceg spends a lot of time on Moreno. But on the flip side, exactly the same thing. And to back that up, that Erceg should be able to get up against Moreno if Moreno takes him down, well, Pantoja hit 9 takedowns against Erceg and never really threatened too much with anything on the mat. Erceg did a really good job, and if he's doing that against Pantoja, you'd imagine he can do it against Moreno. So now I'm thinking, well, this is going to be a fight where, in my opinion, I think it's going to be won and lost on the feet and the striking. And I've just got a funny feeling that Steve Erceg can replicate what Brandon Royval did. And that was just a game plan of the latest Moreno versus Royval fight, I need to add. Because Royval won that fight and he hit so much in volume, and his game plan was clearly just land. It wasn't super technical. It wasn't throwing with a lot of heat, with a lot of power. It was just land. Exactly like that. And that's all Royval did. As the fight went on, his volume was upping and he was just throwing, just light punch, tap. And that's what ended up winning him the fight, in my opinion. And I think Erceg can do exactly that. I think that he's long, he's rangy. I think he can just throw the strikes out and just hit Moreno. Moreno's got good volume himself. He's a guy that in 5-round fights will definitely hit above, 100 significant strikes. I don't even think that's a debate. And I think in this fight, he's going to do exactly the same thing. He's going to hit 100 plus strikes, very comfortably. But the issue with Moreno is he's very hittable at the same time. For as good as he is racking up volume, he absorbs a lot of strikes. And I think Steve Erceg is, again, quite a slick technician on the feet when it comes to the striking. So I'm thinking to myself now, well, the only way that... I'm not going to say the only way that I can see Erceg losing, because I genuinely think it is going to be close and competitive. I think they're both going to land 100 plus strikes. I think they're both going to get hit a bunch of times as well. I think they're both going to hit takedowns. I think they're both going to have slight moments on top and on bottom, and then they get back up. I just think it's going to be a back and forth close fight, but to the point where the way that I would be absolutely convinced of a Moreno win is if Erceg's cardio just doesn't hold up. And the thing is, there is a little bit of a question mark about that, because against Pantoja, look, over 5 rounds, his cardio looked sick. It was absolutely fine, no problem at all. But we've just not seen it at altitude over 5 rounds. And to me, that's the only question mark in this fight. It's is Erceg's cardio genuinely that good and he'll be fine over 5 rounds at altitude? Or was he fine over 5 rounds at sea level, but now he's at altitude, he might struggle after round 3? If that's the case, then I think Moreno smokes him late in this fight. But I haven't seen that yet, so I can't be confident in saying, okay, well, Erceg's going to tire after round 3. I've not seen any evidence of that. All I've seen is Erceg in a 5-round fight against the best flyweight in the world and go absolutely fine over 5 rounds against him late into the fight, into the championship round. So I have to have that mentality of coming into analysing this fight thinking, well, that's the only thing that I've got to go off. So until I see any different, that's what I'm going to think, if that makes sense. So look, for me, I think Steve Erceg has got edges in this fight to win. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be competitive with 2 of the best flyweights in the world. And like I say, in a fight that's super... Look, if this was a pick-em, my pick might still be Erceg, but I'd be definitely less confident in picking Erceg and it'd be more tentative. But with Erceg having that plus money behind him, that's, like I say, it's a betting podcast. And when I'm really conflicted, like I said, when I come out with tape, when I watched this fight and analysed it, and I didn't know the betting line, I was really conflicted and thought Brandon Moreno would be around a -125 favourite, Erceg being plus 100. I genuinely think it's that close and competitive to the point where I'm conflicted about who I'm really confident is going to win this fight. I genuinely have not got that confidence. And in these types of fights, as I always say, more often than not, I'll side with the plus money. So from a straight pick and prediction perspective, I'm picking Steve Erceg to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Manuel Torres versus Drew Dober. And this is a really interesting fight. And again, everybody that does breakdowns that has the podcasts and the YouTube channels, they're all going to be saying the exact same thing about Manuel Torres, and it's a legitimate point to make, and that's why everyone's going to make it. And it's just like, what does he look like in round 3? Because he's been to one decision in his career. That was years ago. And, with it being years ago, younger, like, it's almost impossible to take anything from that. Like, this guy is just a round 1 fighter. We just don't know what he's going to look like late in round 2 and in round 3. And to be honest with you, most of the time it's a credit to him. He's got 7 first-round knockouts and he's got 7 first-round submissions. So the guy is, for as powerful as he is, like, he comes across as this striker, he's got a really tricky grappling game as well. So as much as people might want to paint a negative of, oh, well, how do I know that this guy can fight in round 3? Well, maybe we don't need to know what he fights in round 3 because he's always getting the job done or being killed himself in round 1. Like that Ignacio Barramondes fight last time out, like, again, he lost via knockout in round 1. But look, Barramondes is proven to be some rising star right now, just taking out Jalen Turner as well. So in regards to like that specific fight, again, I'm not putting too much stock into it because Barramondes is, when it comes to losses, sometimes a loss can age well or age badly. Like, that's a loss that's aged quite well. Like, Barramondes is looking like the business, like the full package. So I'm not putting too much stock into that. But regardless of anything else, it's still a question mark on Manuel Torres' cardio and his gas tank. Now, don't get a question mark confused with a red flag, because a red flag here would be Torres. I've seen him going into round 3 and he's got no cardio, he tires out, and if he doesn't get the job done in round 1, he's toast. That's a red flag, but we haven't really seen him in round 3, especially not at this level and very often at all. So that there can't be a red flag there. It's just a question mark because we don't have the answer to it. But what we could find out, like, again, a lot of people will look at that as a negative and think, well, we don't know what his cardio is like in round 3, so I'm going to assume that he hasn't got that gas tank. Well, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. This guy's a professional MMA fighter that's been training at the highest level for many years, and I would imagine that in the gym that he's going 5 hard rounds in training, even though he only needs 3. So I will give the benefit of the doubt in situations like this, rather than thinking, well, I've never seen him go into a round 3 and look good, go into round 3 at all. I'm going to assume he doesn't look good. Like, that's not my way of thinking. My way of thinking, look, I haven't seen him go into round 3, so if I have to guess, I know this guy is a professional MMA fighter in the gym every single day of his life, doing multiple sessions every week. I'm going to assume he's got good cardio until I'm proven otherwise. That's my line of thinking. Now, again, I know I've spent a lot of time on this, but I kind of think it matters because with Drew Dober, if Dober turns his fight into a dogfight, Dober can go 3 rounds. He does slow down a little bit, and that pace does slow with Dober, but his cardio and his gas tank will carry him into round 3 so he can perform. So if he's in a fight where somebody does tire late in round 2 and it goes into round 3 and Dober's made it a dogfight, then Dober's going to take over and look phenomenal late in that fight. So that's why the cardio thing does come into question a little bit, because Dober can go 3 rounds. He's done it for years, and he's a fighter that has been known for, that having that ability to turn fights into a dogfight and go 3 hard if he needs to. The issue I've got with Dober is I kind of feel like his durability, that he's had great durability in his UFC career, but he's been in some wars. The knockout loss against Frivola was a little bit eye-opening, and I kind of think that for fighters that have got good durability, there's always that one fight where they do get knocked out badly and starched that you think, have we just seen some cracks within that durability? And I've got a gut feeling we saw that with Dober against Frivola, but Dober hasn't fought anybody since with that insane power where they can potentially test those cracks in the durability until right now. Like, Torres hits hard and he's a good technical striker as well. And I feel like with him being a little bit taller and longer than Dober, I think Dober's going to come into range, but to come into range, he's got to come through the straight punches from Torres, the long rangy strikes. And I just feel that Torres is going to test that durability. I've got a gut feeling Torres knocks Dober out here. And if he doesn't, then we're going to see the questions being answered. If he doesn't get Dober, even if he drops Dober, if he doesn't knock him out and get that finish in the first round, we're going to see what Torres is like. But I'm telling you, if Torres can fight in round 3, how he fights in round 1, I just think he's going to be better than Dober here. And if Dober tries to take him down, I think he could get some takedowns. But then Torres has got this tricky grappling game where not many people, for as powerful of a striker and as good of a striker as Torres is, not many people have got the better of him on the mat. You know, I'm sure a lot of fighters have tried to take him down thinking that they don't want to deal with that explosive, you know, technical striking on the feet, but then they've not got the better of him on the mat either. And although Dober has got takedowns and he has got good jiu-jitsu, he's not a phenom in regards to his grappling. That's not where he's predominantly best. He's predominantly best within the striking. So I think Dober can mix in some takedowns here, mix in some wrestling, and maybe get a little bit of topside control, but I just don't think it's going to be enough to have this fight won and lost within the wrestling and grappling. And Torres down on the mat, look, if he sprawls and gets a hold of Dober's neck, then there's a possibility of front chokes there himself. So even if Dober is shooting takedowns, there's a potential danger there. And this is the issue. I think there's a danger everywhere with Torres. If you shoot on him, there's a danger. If you get him on the mat, there's a slight danger. If you're on the feet with him, well, he's dangerous. So it's one of them where, like I say, the big question, if everybody knew that Torres could fight in round 3 how he fights in round 1, this fight wouldn't be a pick'em, or Torres wouldn't be like -120, -125. Torres would be like -200. But there's that question mark that keeps the line low. But like I say, for me, I'll always err on the side of this is a professional athlete training 2 or 3 times a day at the highest level. I'm going to assume he's got good cardio. And because of that, that's, to me, the biggest factor of am I confident in Torres winning or not? And with that belief, I do think he gets the job done. So for that reason, along with the other reasons that I've mentioned with Torres, I believe just being dangerous in a lot of positions, I am going to side with Torres. I'm picking Manuel Torres to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got an interesting one here between Kelvin Gastelum and Joe Pyfer. Now, it's an interesting one because this would normally be the fight where, you know, that young rising prospect faces that big tough test and it doesn't quite get past. But what makes it difficult is Joe Pyfer's already had that fight, that 5-round fight with Hermansson, where he was found out, he was tested for the first time against a legitimate opponent that's been at the top of the division for a long time. He took the loss, but he's come back. He had another fight in the UFC. But again, this is where it poses another slight issue. Like, the fight that he had on his return needed to be the right fight to help build him, which was Marc-Andre Barrier, which he finished the fight by knockout in round 1, looked great in doing so. So it's one of these where you would probably think that maybe Pyfer has another fight like a Barrier or a little bit more of a step up in competition before he jumps back in against a seasoned veteran, a fighter that's been in the UFC rankings for years in multiple divisions as well. But then the flip side to all this is, well, Kelvin Gastelum is a fighter that is still quite young, but because he's been fighting at the highest level for so many years, like he has been in wars, and it's more miles on the clock with Gastelum than it is, you know, just being up there in age. Like, he's been around for years, you know, issues cutting weight multiple times as well. So again, the body's been through so many weight cuts, so many fights, so many wars, and at some point that's going to take its toll. So again, when you add that into the factor of Gastelum fighting that young, hungry, you know, rising star that's coming through, it just makes it for an interesting fight. But again, flipping back onto Gastelum, when Gastelum loses fights, he's losing to Sean Brady, who we just saw dominate a former champion last weekend. He's losing to Jared Cannonier, he's fought for a title. Robert Whittaker, former champion. Jack Hermansson, again a fighter that we've just said that Joe Pyfer lost to in his big test. Israel Adesanya, former champion. So when Gastelum's losing, he's losing to the very, very best in the division, and it just makes it for a real difficult fight to be so confident in. But again, it's one of them where, look, Pyfer's already had his test. So is this now the fight where Pyfer takes his career to the next level? Because we see that all the time. A lot of fighters will have that first test, they'll stumble, they'll fall at that test, they'll rebuild, and then they'll have another test not too long after, and that's the test that they pass with flying colours and take the career to the next level. Like, I kind of get the gut feeling that it's going to be that type of fight. And when you look at the physical perspective, like I say, not only the age and the miles on the clock, but Pyfer's 6'2", 75-inch reach to Gastelum's 5'9", 70. Well, like Pyfer's just going to be a lot bigger inside the cage. And again, it's like when you start to look at your age, the miles on the clock, the length, the reach, and then you start to look at physical attributes like speed and movement, which are likely going to be on the side of Pyfer. Pyfer's more explosive as well. With him being taller and longer, he's going to fire the big head kicks, the long straight punches, and Gastelum's going to have to walk through that to get at him. But Gastelum's kind of spent a career doing that anyway. More often than not, at 5'9" at these weight classes, he's going to be the smaller guy that has to close the distance. Then you add the altitude in there. Well, I trust Kelvin Gastelum at altitude. His cardio has always held up for him. But then Pyfer, like, we don't know. We don't know if he's going to be able to go the 3 hard rounds that Gastelum's going to push, because, again, Gastelum's got to be the one moving forwards. If he's not, then he's toast, in my opinion, because Pyfer will just have the time of his life. But this is another reason why, again, I'm flipping back onto the side of Pyfer's positives. I think Pyfer's going to have a good time here in regards to, you know, that pace and the distance management, because I think if Gastelum is coming forwards and Pyfer's landing on him as he's trying to close the distance, at some point hesitance is going to start setting in for Gastelum, and I think Pyfer's going to be able to put his foot on the gas a little bit and push Gastelum back. The difference is Pyfer doesn't have to close that distance with Gastelum. He can push him back a couple of steps, reset back into the centre, then go again. Like, I don't think Pyfer's going to close the distance all the way in where he's in boxing range with Gastelum, because that's going to be where Gastelum has got his best opportunities to try and win the fight and try and land on Pyfer. So from a distance management perspective and the forward pressure, I do think the longer the fight goes on, the more Pyfer's going to build with that pressure and get Gastelum on the back foot a little bit before resetting into the centre, back foot reset. And I think it's going to be that type of fight. And I actually don't think that it's a terrible idea for Pyfer to shoot a takedown either if Gastelum's on the back foot. Like, Gastelum can be taken down. He's not got a bad jiu-jitsu game. But Pyfer on top, I think he'll be really heavy. He'll be like a blanket. So again, I just think that there's maybe multiple paths to victory for Pyfer. I think he could win a 15-minute K1 fight, and I think if he mixes in the takedowns and the wrestling and the topside grappling, I think there's a path to victory for him there as well. So although it's a difficult one to be overly confident with, I just think there's ways for Pyfer to look really good here, and I think this will be the coming out fight of Pyfer of, right, now he's taking his career to the next level. Now we know that Pyfer's on his way to heading towards the top of the division. So for those reasons, I'm picking Joe Pyfer to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Raul Rosas Jr. versus Vince Morales. Now, I'm quite confident that Raul Rosas Jr. is going to win this fight, but with that being said, it does seem to happen that every time everyone's super confident that Raul Rosas Jr. is going to win a fight, he either doesn't win or it gets a lot closer than what you expect. And the thing is with Vince Morales, like, I feel like Morales has got a little bit of an underrated grappling game. Like, the dude is a good scrambler. He knows exactly what he's doing on the mat. But I kind of think in this fight that's potentially going to be to his detriment, because I think that Morales is going to come into this fight and think, look, if Raul Rosas Jr. wants to take me down, let's roll and see who's the better grappler. I think that's going to be his mindset. I think he's going to be comfortable in his own head thinking that he's a better grappler than Raul Rosas Jr. And I'm just not sure that Morales is going to get the success on the mat that he wants, because I think that he'll get taken down multiple times and he might have a few moments early in this fight and he might have a few moments late in this fight if it goes there as well. Like, if Raul Rosas Jr. does slow down a little bit, then I think Morales' gas tank will probably hold up, and I think maybe he might have some moments on the mat late in the fight, but I just kind of feel that at worst it's going to be a little bit like what we saw with Loughran and Fletcher last weekend. I think it's going to be Raul Rosas Jr. that's getting the takedowns, and maybe Morales is standing back up a few times, but then Raul Rosas Jr. starts having a little bit more success on the mat, and then he's getting a back, and then he's making Vince Morales work more than what Morales probably thought he was going to have to work. And I think it's a fight that Rosas Jr. is just going to drag. and he's going to drag without expending too much cardio, because I don't think it's going to be like the Christian Rodriguez fight, for example, where Rodriguez is sweeping him, getting on top, and now Raul Rosas Jr. is having to get back up to his feet and expend all that energy. I think at worst for Rosas Jr., Morales will be getting back up against the cage, and Rosas just has to quickly dump him back down again. And that's not going to expend the energy on the side of Rosas Jr. That's Morales that'll be expending that energy to just wall walking, get back up to a knee or get back to both feet, and then Rosas Jr. just got to quickly whip those legs back out again off the cage, get Morales down again, and just rinse and repeat. So I think from a striking perspective, Rosas Jr. as well, potentially more dangerous. I think that he's got a big punch. He could land on Morales and hurt him. So again, I think it's a good fight stylistically for Rosas Jr. I don't think it's going to be one where he's just going to try and make this a K1 fight. I think he'll close the distance, level change, and look for takedowns against Morales, and Morales will struggle because of the wrestling, not because of the grappling, because of the wrestling. For those reasons, I'm picking Raul Rosas Jr. to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got UFC newcomer David Martinez versus Saimon Oliveira. Now, Saimon Oliveira is a fighter that, he's experienced. I actually like watching Saimon Oliveira fight, and I thought when he was coming into the UFC, he was going to be a fighter that was going to do really well, but it's kind of not really panned out for him. And to be fair, you could make excuses for him, like the first fight in the UFC, Tony Gravely. That's a fighter that I actually don't even know what's happened to Tony Gravely, but Tony Gravely was that traditional old school boxer wrestler type of, Sean Sherk type of fighter. Those that have been around long enough will know exactly what I mean by Sean Sherk. A fighter that's looking to land punches, hard boxing, and then blend that into the wrestling. So, a difficult fight for Saimon Oliveira on his UFC debut. At the time, Gravely was looking great as well. So then he goes from that loss to Gravely into a fight with Daniel Marcos, and Daniel Marcos is a stud, man. Like, again, you can potentially make a pass for him for that as well. Like Daniel Marcos, put him against David Martinez, it'd be a sick fight, but Daniel Marcos would win in my opinion. And the thing is with David Martinez, like David Martinez is, again, I'm going to use the word sick because I love this guy. This guy's fast. He's electric. He's hard. He screws his face up in anger as well when he fights, and he just looks like he's got a lot of personality inside the cage. And this is where I think that Oliveira is going to struggle here, because Oliveira, he's got good qualities. Like he is a good striker, Muay Thai base, and then he's also got good submissions as well. But the thing is with Martinez, I don't think he's going to shoot and put his neck into one of those positions where Oliveira might be able to take advantage of it. And on the feet striking, although Oliveira is a good striker, he seems to be able to be got at so comfortably when he's facing somebody that's aggressive and is aggressive with forward pressure as well. Oliveira seems to crumble under that type of pressure where he's forced on the back foot against somebody that's looking to land volume and have the cardio to continuously land volume. Like, that's ultimately where Daniel Marcos ended up breaking Oliveira himself. Like, Marcos put the pressure on him and Oliveira couldn't deal with the pressure. And I kind of think that Martinez is way more aggressive than Daniel Marcos. And I'm not saying he's a better fighter than Daniel Marcos, don't get that twisted, but I think Martinez is definitely more aggressive with harder forward pressure and packs, power in boxing combinations. So I just feel that Martinez is going to break Oliveira at some point in this fight with that forward pressure and with the aggression coupled with that forward pressure as well. Like I say, it's not going to shock me that a guy coming from the Contender Series who's a minus 400 favourite in his UFC debut gets beaten, because we've read that story and watched that film multiple times. But from an analysis perspective, Martinez has got a style and characteristic traits that Oliveira has historically really struggled with. And for that reason, the analysis has to go on a David Martinez win for me. And I think he probably gets Oliveira out of there with a knockout or TKO as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking David Martinez to win this fight. In the next fight, we've got Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Kelvin Borjas. And this is a really good fight as well. Like, Ronaldo Rodriguez, talk about personality and characteristic traits inside the cage. This guy is definitely a fighter that I think is a fan favourite. At least I'm a fan of him. Like, he's just got a ton of personality. He's so good. He doesn't give a shit. He'll come forward. He'll throw hard. His grappling is I think his grappling is so good as well. Like, he can get taken down quite comfortably, but man, like, he's so comfortable grappling off his back, and then he can sweep, he can scramble, get to a better position, and then he can also wrestle himself. Like, it's almost like he baits his opponents into this false sense of security that they can take him down and they've got the wrestling and grappling advantage, and then suddenly they're swept, or he's back on his feet and now he's shooting a takedown and now you're on your back and you're thinking, well, how did that happen? 1 minute I was looking great with my takedowns and I'm on top of you, and the next minute I'm being out wrestled and I'm being out grappled. And then on the feet striking, like, again, Rodriguez doesn't really give a fuck. He'll come forwards and he'll look to land bombs. This is where his issue is, though. The striking defense. Like, Ronaldo Rodriguez is a dangerous forward striker. He's got good low kicks. He puts combinations together well. He can get takedowns. He's got good grappling. And again, wrestling, grappling, both offensively and defensively, like I've already explained. But he leaves holes on the feet for his opponents to get at him. Like, you look at the fight against Ode Osborne. Like, Rodriguez, another referee would have stopped that fight and Rodriguez would have lost that fight by knockout. So Rodriguez has got to tighten up on the defense. For as good as what he is offensively, and even defensively in other areas, his striking defense, there's holes there. And this is what gives me a little bit of a pause in this fight, because Kevin Borjas, again, has had a tough start to the UFC, and you can give him a pass on a couple of his fights as well. Joshua Van and Alessandro Costa, two real high-level fighters in the division as your first two fights in the UFC. Like, come on. And even Ronaldo Rodriguez, like, Borjas is having a tough start to the UFC in regards to how they're matching him. But the thing is, I think Ronaldo Rodriguez is a step down in competition from Alessandro Costa and Joshua Van, and I don't think that's a debate either. So this is going to be the best fight that Kevin Borjas has had in the UFC. And I think Borjas is still better than what people are going to be making out he is. Like, I don't think a lot of people are going to give credit to the fact that Borjas was just fighting, like, seriously good opponents. And you put Ronaldo Rodriguez in there with Alessandro Costa and with Joshua Van, and I think the exact same outcomes happen. So Borjas, I think, is still one of them where what people are going to say about Borjas is the last fight with Costa, he just got blitzed through. Joshua Van, he was in the fight, he dropped Van early on, but we all know Van starts fights quite slow. And then Borjas still gave a good account of himself, but against Alessandro Costa, I don't think that he gave a good account of himself. He just got absolutely ran through. And you could potentially, again, talk about the aggression and forward pressure of Alessandro Costa being quite similar to Ronaldo Rodriguez. So stylistically, we've seen, you know, Borjas lose to that type of fight last time, and Ronaldo Rodriguez could be able to implement that blueprint of how to beat Borjas. And I do think that's a possibility. But again, you look at the defensive holes of Rodriguez, I think Borjas can exploit that as well. So on one side of the coin, you've got Ronaldo Rodriguez, who's a forward pressure, aggressive fighter who's going to be fighting in Mexico, feeding off the energy of the crowd, against a fighter that we've just got ran through, in his previous fight in the exact same way. But also, you look at someone like Ode Osborne, who's able to find holes and drop Ronaldo Rodriguez. Well, I think Kevin Borjas is a better technical striker than Ode Osborne. So if Osborne's finding those holes, I think Borjas can. And I think Borjas could expose Ronaldo Rodriguez like that. So again, you can come down on either side of the fence. For me, though, the reason why I'm picking Ronaldo here is purely because I think Borjas has to keep this fight standing to win, whereas Ronaldo Rodriguez can mix the fights up. I do think, look, if this is a K1 fight for 15 minutes, I think Rodriguez could beat Borjas in a K1 fight, but I definitely think that's giving Borjas every opportunity to beat him as well. However, if Rodriguez is mixing in the wrestling and the grappling here, it adds a second layer of path to victory, and that's where, in a fight that I think could be close and competitive, I do think having a second path to victory is always quite favourable, and that's why I'm leaning towards Ronaldo. So I'm picking Ronaldo Rodriguez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Edgar Chairez versus CJ Vergara. I think this is a really well-matched fight. I'm really surprised that we've got Chairez at minus 300 with Vergara at plus 250. Like, I didn't expect that. I really, really didn't. And I think that the line is way too wide for how close this fight could be. Like, yes, Chairez is fighting at home, but who is Chairez actually beaten to make you feel super comfortable for him to be a minus 300 favourite against another fighter just like Chairez that hasn't really set the cage alight in the UFC. But what I will give credit to both fighters for is they've both been put in there with tough competition, with a tough level of opponent. Like, I think there's a good fighter in both of these fighters. It's just when you're fighting the guys that the UFC are trying to match him with, well, what do you expect the outcomes to be? They're both fighting legit fighters in the UFC, which is what's supposed to happen. But I also don't think that you can come down on Chairez and be like, I'm absolutely confident he's going to run through Vergara. I don't think you can say the same thing about Vergara either. I think even stylistically, they can both strike, they can both wrestle, they can both grab. They're both good all-round types of fighters. I think Chairez is definitely the harder hitter, but I think Vergara is definitely the better mover, the more elusive mover, quicker movement. So it's like Vergara has been knocked out and he has been got at, but again, he's tough. But so's Chairez. Chairez is tough as well. It's like, this fight is so evenly matched to the point where both fighters were probably thinking, man, just stop giving me these like ultra prospects that are rising in the division. And the UFC have said, okay to you and okay to you, fight each other. And I think that's the type of fight we've got here. So to have like a minus 300 favourite, I think is ridiculous. The thing is with Chairez, I think Chairez is going to be super dangerous in round one. But Chairez slows down, and I don't think many people pick up on this because of the types of fights that he's normally in. But if you go back and look outside of the UFC, you see historical evidence of this. Chairez is very good in round one, but then he becomes super low volume. He doesn't exactly gas out, like he's not got his hands on his hips and he's, breathing with his mouth open or anything like that. His volume just drops off a cliff. So whether it's just a management technique for him to just lower the volume so he doesn't end up hands on his hips with his mouth wide open, I don't know. But after round one, Chairez has a great round one. After round one, he slows down, volume drops off, but Vergara will pick up the longer the fight goes on. So you've got contrasting styles here of where both of these fighters do best in the fights. I think Vergara is going to be at risk in round one of getting finished. But if he gets past round one, I'm telling you now, this fight goes super close and probably in the favour of Vergara. Now, two things here when it comes to a straight pick and prediction from me. The first one, more often than not, I'll trust the guy that will come on stronger later in a fight and just hope that they don't get knocked out in round one. It's a small window of opportunity in round one. For any fighter that needs that round one knockout, it's just categorized as a small window of opportunity. And second of all, the small window of opportunity, guys, minus 300. So from a straight pick and prediction perspective on a betting podcast, I'm going to side with the underdog. I'm picking CJ Vergara to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got newcomer Ateba Gautier versus Jose Medina. Now, Medina is the fighter that is known for, that fighter that got signed to the UFC. He got given a UFC contract when he was absolutely dominated in a Contender Series fight, with Dana White just randomly saying, look, this kid's got something, he's got toughness, he's got heart, and he signs him to the UFC. Like, look, credit to Medina. Like, I'm always up for a guy succeeding in life. Like I say, you go into the Contender Series and some fighters haven't got contracts from getting wins. So for a fighter to get a contract off a dominant loss, again, very surprising. And that dominant loss, by the way, that, his opponent got signed, which, again, that would be an even harder kick in the teeth if the loser gets signed and the winner doesn't. But Magomed Gaziasulov is a fighter that has had some issues and struggles in the UFC as well. So not only did Medina get dominated by him, but the guy he got dominated by has come into the UFC and struggled himself. Then Medina, as a fighter, he makes his UFC debut and he gets beaten by Zach Reese. And again, that's not a loss that's aged very well either. Like, I quite like Zach Reese, to be fair. Like, I think he's super fun, super explosive. But Zach Reese is a fighter that's just coming off, a loss where he was finished in. So it's not looking great for Medina. And then what's also not looking great for Medina is the fact that Gautier is 6'4" with an 81-inch reach in this division and built like a brick shithouse. Like, this dude's massive and he's powerful and he's, he has got the hole with the wrestling and getting back up to, well, I wouldn't say necessarily the wrestling, but he can be taken down, but he can also defend takedowns. We saw that in his Contender Series fight. He was took down in round one, couldn't get back up to his feet. That's where his hole is, the defensive grappling. But then in round two, the opponent shoots in on him again, thinking, well, he can't get up off his feet, so I'm going to shoot, and it's the right thing to do. But then Gautier defended the takedown. kept it on the feet, then knocked him out not so long afterwards. So again, when it comes to Gautier, he's got this, like, in my opinion, this 50-50 wrestling defense where he can defend some takedowns. Probably depends on if the entry is good. I think if the entry is good, he's not defending the takedowns, and then the issue is getting back up to his feet. But Medina's not the type of fighter that's really going to shoot a lot of takedowns, and I don't think if he shoots the wrestling, I think he's going to be one of these fighters that probably is going to shoot, but maybe doesn't set it up right, doesn't get that entry right, maybe shoots from a little bit further out and gets put in danger because of it. And then when Gautier knows that Medina doesn't want to stand and strike with him, and he can defend the takedowns and stay on the feet, his confidence is going to go through the roof, and his performance will reflect that. I just think that Medina's in for a difficult time here. And the thing is with Medina, look, I will give him credit. He's got toughness, he's got heart. He's one of the toughest motherfuckers in the UFC because the dude can take a beating. But this is your problem when your biggest strength and the best trait and attribute of you as a fighter is your strength and your toughness. Is your toughness and your durability. And when people are analysing your fights, they're also sort of reflecting the same thing as well. Like, when the best part of your game is you can take a punch and you're tough and durable, like, that's not a fighter that's going to thrive in the UFC, because you need a skill set to be able to win. Like, yeah, it's great that you're tough and you can make fights super entertaining, you can take a beating, but it's got no longevity of where it is. And Gautier, I do think, is quite green. I do think he's got a big developmental phase to go through, but I think the UFC have given him the perfect fighter. Somebody that is gonna stand there and be there for the shots, that's probably not going to shoot a lot of takedowns, and if he does, probably not be that successful. And I just think it's one there for Gautier to win. He's massive, 6'4", 81-inch reach, hits like a truck, built like a brick shithouse, against a guy whose best characteristics is his toughness and durability. You put 2 and 2 together and you're kind of getting 4 here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ateba Gautier to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Melquizael Costa versus Christian Rodriguez. And that's the last time I say Costa's first name. We'll call him Melk Costa from now on in. But Melk Costa making his, quick turnaround from his last fight with Andre Fili. Now, my stance on Costa kind of stays the same. Like, I'm not overly impressed with Costa at this level. Although, I did bet Andre Fili, and I did lose that bet, so I kind of have to have some respect for Costa in regards to, he's just beaten Andre Fili. So that's a really good win, and you can't take that away from Costa. But again, I don't want to sort of downplay that win for Costa, because, he got Fili out of there as well. Like, he did everything he needed to do. But I kind of feel like Fili just didn't perform, and maybe we are seeing the back end of Fili's career now, in regards to, he's not the exact fighter he was sort of like 5-6 years ago, because I think that version of Fili would have smoked Costa. Like, Costa, he fights in a southpaw stance, and it was just the kicks to the open body, legs, body, head. So he did mix it up well, but it's not as if the kicks were being set up by hands or anything like that. It was just big open kick, and Fili just had no answers for it. He was there just eating kicks to, like, his forearms and the inside of his legs. I don't know, it was just really weird. I kind of feel like Fili just didn't perform, and the fact that Costa looked as good as he did was more on Fili than it was Costa himself. Now, I'm not saying right now that Fili would have definitely won if he'd had an answer for those kicks, but I just feel that we saw a very different an underperformed Andre Fili in that fight. And now Costa's got a quick turnaround against a guy that's in Christian Rodriguez, that's been, that's got the nickname of the hype killer. He's constantly, or he was for like 3 fights in a row, put in there against massive hype trains from the UFC, hype trains that are unbeaten, that everybody's super high on. It was almost like, it was really weird that UFC kept on giving Christian Rodriguez these guys. Like, it was Raul Rosas Jr. when all the hype was on him, undefeated prospect. Then it was Cameron Saimon. Oh, no, it wasn't Saimon. Saimon was the third one, I think. I don't remember the order, but Cameron Saimon, undefeated prospect, loads of hype on him. Then there was Isaac Dulgarian, who, look, I still think Dulgarian beat Rodriguez, but the fight was that close and competitive for a fighter that's legitimately skilled in regards to having like a high-level wrestling background in Isaac Dulgarian, like, he was also an unbeaten, hyped prospect that people were saying, including myself, that he might get up there into the top 10, top 5, and then who knows. So Rodriguez went in against all of those guys in a row and beat them all. So, like, Rodriguez is a real tough fighter, and I kind of feel that he's a fighter that's learnt on the job and developed way faster than what I think a lot of people anticipated to develop with the developing speed, if that makes sense. I just feel that Christian Rodriguez is now at a point where he's 27 years old, he's been battle-tested ridiculously. He's a fighter that was predominantly a striker, but because that many opponents wanted to take him down, wrestle and grapple with him, because he's that good of a striker, his wrestling and grappling, I think it's fair to say, has caught up to his striking. Like, Rodriguez is now one of these fighters, in my opinion, that he's young, he's still improving, but now has accrued a shitload of experience at only 27 years old, and he's now just super hard to beat because his background and his predominantly best striking, but then he's now shown that you've got, you know, even at the highest level of wrestling outside of MMA, he's going to be able to deal with. He's going to be able to deal with your grappling as well. He's going to be able to stand back up, but not only that, he can now sweep you and stay on top if that's what he wants to do, and then be dangerous on top of you. So, for me, Christian Rodriguez is put himself in a position where it's like, where do you beat this guy? Like, this guy has faced like legitimate fighters with who are legitimately elite in specific areas. And he's done that in different areas. It's not as if he's beaten 3 wrestlers or 3 grapplers. Like, Cameron Saimon was an elite striker. You know, Dulgarian, elite wrestler. Raul Rosas Jr. had that new era MMA game where he's just unbelievable everywhere. He's got power on his feet, but then his wrestling's relentless. His grappling was good. He was choking everybody, submitting everybody. So Rodriguez has passed all those tests. And look, to not base a narrative on anything, you have to talk about the bad as well. Look, he went in there against Julian Erosa and got took out by Erosa, who, you know, I'm laughing because you beat all these absolute killer hype trains, and then you go in there against Erosa in a fight that the UFC have probably just said to him, well, okay, you've had these 3 hype trains, right, we'll give you Julian Erosa, who's a guy that's tough and durable and got some skills, but someone that you should be able to absolutely shine on as a thank you for taking these 3 prospects that probably nobody else wanted. And then Rodriguez drops the ball. So he's got a ball drop in him as well, but it's, look, at some point, all fighters take that loss that they're not supposed to take, or a lot of people didn't think they were going to take, and you learn from those losses. Coming in here against Costa, I just think Rodriguez is better everywhere. Like, I don't think Costa's just going to be able to fire these kicks to the open body of Rodriguez and Rodriguez not have an answer for it, a counter for it, or, you know, just anything to come back at him for. I just don't think we see that. We don't see the sort of, you know, unresponsive defensive striking that we saw from like Andre Fili in Costa's last fight. I think Rodriguez is going to be a problem. I think he's the better striker here. Maybe not as much the dangerous striker. I do think Costa's quite dangerous with you know, sort of, again, he's not known for his one-punch knockout power, but he does throw with heat. So I think maybe the heat and the power side, or at least the power that he tries to pack into his shots, is maybe on the side of Costa. But I think Rodriguez is better offensively and defensively striking. I think he's better offensively and defensively wrestling, and I think he's better offensively and defensively grappling. I just think Rodriguez is the way better fighter, and I think you look at the guys that he's beaten, I think he's beaten fighters that are way better than what Costa is right now. So I just think it's a good fight for Rodriguez. I don't think there was many potentially holding the hands up to fight Rodriguez. Costa wanted that quick turnaround. He's a badass. You can tell he won't give a fuck about who he fights. He'll go in there against anybody. And this is the other thing with Rodriguez as well. Like, it's literally just sprung to me. The Austin Bashi fight last time out, he was 13-0. So Rodriguez has actually done this 4 times. He's fought 4 fighters that were unbeaten, hype-trained prospects that were real problems stylistically for pretty much every fighter in the division outside of maybe the top 15, top 20. And Rodriguez has beaten all of them, all of their first losses, all 4 of their first losses for these relentless hype trains that were smoking everybody have all been to Christian Rodriguez, and he's done it all relatively dominant and comfortable as well. Like I say, the only one that I don't think was as dominant and comfortable was The Isaac Dulgarian fight, like I say, I did think Isaac Dulgarian won that fight, but man, like I say, you can't take anything away from Rodriguez. He's just absolutely destroying the fighters that are these young, hungry prospects that, like I say, hype train, fire on them right now, dominant, relentless. And I think he's got a Melquizael Costa in front of him here who isn't as good as Austin Bashir, who isn't as good as Isaac Dulgarian, who isn't as good as Cameron Saimon, who isn't as good as Raul Rosas Jr. I mean, some of them, you might want to debate, but for me, I would favour all of those 4 fighters against Costa as well. And then you add in the fact that I genuinely, take away previous competition, I think Rodriguez is the better striker, wrestler, grappler. I just think Rodriguez has got him beat here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Christian Rodriguez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Julia Polastri versus Lupita Godinez. Now, Julia Polastri is a fighter that just goes about her business in the UFC, very quiet, under the radar. I don't think many people are talking about her. And again, I'm not being disrespectful there. I just don't think she's had that, that pop in the UFC yet, if you like. But with Julia Polastri, I think she's quite well rounded. She's got a good skill set, Muay Thai style. She can stand and strike. But if her opponent's the better striker, then she will look to mix in some takedowns as well. I don't think she's prolific in any one specific area, but I think she's comfortably well rounded in the division to the point where she's going to win fights in the UFC. She will develop. She will get better as well. And she's got a step up in competition here, which I think is deserved, if I'm being honest. It's just when you look at this matchup against Godinez, I think it's a step up in competition that's maybe a little bit too much too soon. Like, I've just mentioned it with Christian Rodriguez in the previous breakdown. I think that Lupe Godinez, she's predominantly a wrestler, but I do think that the striking's closer than the other elements, but I think that she could potentially be the slightly better striker. If it's a 15-minute K1 fight, I think Godinez will do a good job here, but then she's the better wrestler and grappler. So, again, it's one of those fights where I'm looking at Polastri. How does Polastri win? Well, I think the most probable way that Polastri is going to win is just by making this fight super close. Maybe it's a split decision, but to make it super close, I've got to kind of think that she stays on her feet and defends all the takedowns and the wrestling pressure from Godinez, and I don't think she does that. My question mark would more be on, does Godinez actually shoot takedowns? Because she is one of these fighters that does have good wrestling and grappling, but sometimes in some fights she just won't use it, and you're like, well, why aren't you using it? You're really good there. And she just loves to stand and strike and being a banger, which is fair enough. So I've more got a question mark on, does Godinez actually shoot takedowns and get a topside grappling going, rather than, Polastri will stop these takedowns and get back up to her feet. I think if Godinez comes in here with a wrestling and grappling game plan, I just don't see Polastri winning at all. But then if she doesn't, and it's a K1 fight, then I think Godinez probably still wins anyway. It's just become super closer and super more competitive than what it should be. But whichever way you look at it, I think Godinez is going to win. It's just the wrestling and grappling is a very obvious path to victory and can make it comfortable. So for those reasons, I'm picking Lupita Godinez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Rafa Garcia versus Vinc Pichel. Now, Vinc Pichel's taken this fight on short notice, and I think even without the short notice, it's a comfortable fight for Garcia, in my opinion. But adding the short notice to the equation, I think it becomes that little bit better for Garcia overall. Look, Vinc Pichel is still a badass. He's still a fighter that I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, still like watching him fight, but he's like 43, 44 now. He's getting up there in age. He also hasn't fought in a year. He's had one fight in the last 3 years. It all just adds up to something that is probably where we're looking at Vinc Pichel being at the end of his career, and he might even retire after this fight. Like I say, up there in age, quite inactive, has been inactive for a number of years. I think he's dealt with a few injuries. He's also been in a load of wars. Like I say, he's a badass, and I've got nothing but respect for Vinc Pichel, but he's coming to the end of the road for being competitive at this level in the UFC. I'm not saying he couldn't go to, he couldn't come out of the UFC and be competitive on the regional scene. He absolutely would. And I'm not saying he can't do any other combat sports, but I'm just saying at this level in the UFC, the road is very close to he's very close to running out of that road, if that makes sense. Whereas Rafa Garcia is much younger, much more active. I think that with that youth comes the youthful energy. He's got a good all-round game, so I think when it comes to the striking, he's not going to be someone that gets bombed by Pichel and knocked out. And I'm not saying that can't happen because they're wearing 4-ounce gloves and anybody can get caught, but I just don't think it's a probable outcome. I think that Garcia is going to be quicker, he's going to be slicker on the feet, and then when it comes to being quicker and slicker on the feet, he's going to be able to manage the range and the pace a little bit better than Pichel. And then I think that he can also take Pichel down as well, and I think he can do good work on Pichel, potentially submit him on the mat. On the feet, I don't expect a one bomb from Garcia, but maybe there's an accumulation of volume. Pichel starts, shelling up against the cage, and then Garcia, gets that standing TKO, or maybe Pichel does drop and that's the referee seen enough. I just think that Garcia, look, even take away the age and the miles on the clock and the inactivity from Pichel, when you look at this style versus style, I think that Garcia is just a little bit more dominant everywhere. I think he's a slightly better technical striker. I think that when it comes to the grappling, is the better topside grappler, and then the wrestling's quite even, maybe edge on Garcia there, but just being able to get that one takedown and then get his grappling going, I think that Pichel's just going to struggle. So even taking away the age, the inactivity of Pichel, I still think Garcia stylistically has a good fight here. Then you add in the short notice as well, and again, it's just one of them. I've said it before in this same podcast, you start 2 + 2, you start getting 4. And I think that's the case again here. I'm picking Rafa Garcia to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jamall Emmers versus Gabriel Miranda. Now, this should be comfortable for Jamall Emmers, if I'm being honest. He's better absolutely everywhere. Apart from maybe the submission threat, which is where Miranda's absolute path to victory is. But look, striking, experience, level of competition, speed, movement, just overall skill set, absolutely everything points to Jamall Emmers, to the point where I'm looking at his betting line and I'm seeing his -300 and thinking, well, why is this dude not -500, -600? I think the closer we get to fight night, it will, by the way, widen out there. I just think Emmers is going to be a part of everybody's parlays, which, you accumulate that over fight week, and then everybody with the parlays putting them on the Saturday just before the fight. I think that we'll see that line widen up to that -500, -600, but it does beg the question of why it's not there now. And I kind of think that, I don't know how to say it, I don't mean this disrespectfully with what I'm saying, but I think Miranda's got this flash submission opportunity here. And Emmers is the type of fighter that I don't think, especially the hardcore fans, I don't think would be overly shocked if, we saw Emmers, shooting for a takedown and Miranda grab the neck and choke him. Or if Emmers drops Miranda, gets on top, and Miranda sweeps him and submits him. I just think the flash, like a flash KO, that one punch that just lands, ends the fight. And again, that flash KO can happen from any type of fighter, whether you're a -1,000 favourite or +1,000 underdog. I think Miranda's got this same flash finish, type of trait that he could play on in this fight in regards to that flash submission. Just again, a perfect example is, look at Shauna Bannon last weekend, got dropped hard by Tomar, and then the next thing she's won by armbar. That's what I'm talking about, flash submission. And I just feel that Gabriel Miranda's got that in his locker, and I kind of feel, like I say, Emmers could potentially fall into that trap as well. It just wouldn't shock me at all. But when it comes to predicting a fight, if that's the basis you've got for one fighter, you just can't pick that fighter to win. That outcome might happen, but it's stupidly low, percentage probability. And when it comes to the likelihood of it actually happening, it's a possibility. Outside of that, like I say, Emmers is skill set's better, physically better, physical attributes are better, the traits are better, everything of him is about a fighter. That he's just operating on a completely different level to Miranda. But it's just, does he fall into a trap? And that's why, in my opinion, the line right now isn't -500, -600 naturally. It'll blow up to that with parlays, but naturally right now, I do think there might be some hesitation for people at -300 on Emmers. And it just, like I say, it wouldn't shock me. I can't speak for everybody, but yeah, look, I can't pick a fighter to win based off that. Like I say, I think Emma's as an athlete and as a professional MMA fighter with wrestling, striking, grappling, all the disciplines that go along with it, I think Emma's is better everywhere. So that's why I have to pick him. But like, yeah, there's something that tells me that Miranda might be live early. And again, that's the other thing. It's a small window of opportunity. If Miranda does this, definitely going to be in the first round. Like, I don't think it happens around 2 or 3. So there's a low percentage probability for a flash finish from Miranda, and it's a submission, not a knockout, which makes it a little bit tougher as well. And then a small window of opportunity. Yeah, when you add it up, it is unlikely, but not impossible. Look, I'm talking on now. I'm picking Jamall Emmers to win this fight. And in the next fight, and the last fight on the breakdown, we've got Austin Hubbard versus Markel Medeiros. Now, I am picking Medeiros. I like Medeiros as a fighter. I think he's got some really good traits, good characteristics as well. I like his striking. It's slick, it's fluid, he's well-rounded also. So he does have, some wrestling and grappling to play with. It is a bit of a tentative pick, though, because Austin Hubbard, I always have a real hard time. I don't have a hard time picking against him. I pick against him more often than not. But he always proves that he's not somebody that should be overlooked. And credit to him. Like, he's one of these fighters that's just got a general, real good all-round game, but more from a defensive perspective. And that's what makes him very difficult to beat, because it's not as if like he's good all round offensively and you can get at him in a few areas. Like it's the other way around. Like sometimes you probably want to see him give more offensively, but he doesn't because there's some limitations there. But defensively, man, he just makes himself so hard to beat. Like you try and think that you're going to style on him striking, and suddenly he's in there, he's eating your shots and firing back, and now suddenly what you were doing really good, you've now slowed down a little bit because you're like, well, I can't get this guy, and now this guy's landing on me, and suddenly the fight starts getting super close, and then you think, okay, well, I'll take him down, and then you go to take him down and realise that his takedown defense is good, and you try a couple of takedowns, maybe 2, 3, 4, and you finally get him down, and you think, right, okay, I've got him down, but then he gets right back up to his feet, and you're thinking, well, that's just took me 4 takedowns to get him down, and he's got right back up, so now maybe I've got to shoot another 2 or 3, maybe 4 again to get him down again, and then maybe I have an extra 10 or 15 seconds on top of him this time, but then he's back up again, and it's like, the dude defensively is just a nightmare, because, like I say, he stays safe. He doesn't really, at this level, let anybody style on him. So he's a tough fighter to beat, and I think Medeiros will find a way here. It's a tentative pick because I just know that it's going to be one of these fights that are just super close, or at least that's what I'm anticipating. And at some point, Hubbard's going to hit that massive decline, and he will be that defense will start to break in the areas, and he will be more comfortable to beat. I just don't think that A, it's now, and B, it's Medeiros that's going to expose that. I think that it's going to be close, it's going to be competitive. And it might be one where Medeiros just slightly edges each round, and the 30-27 looks like it's a clinic, but I think even in a 30-27, it's still going to be a close fight. So I am siding with Medeiros, but it is a tentative one because of the defensive attributes of Hubbard. But for the straight pick and prediction, I'm picking Markel Medeiros to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, as I always say, thank you for everybody tuning in. I really do appreciate it. I was also on another podcast last week as well with Dan Levy at Half the Battle, Best Fight Picks. So again, thank you for Dan for having me on that show. And there was a lot of positive comments on that YouTube channel as well, which is Half the Battle. And like I say, you guys are awesome that are commenting and like the back and forth discussions, because look, it's a prediction game, and some people are going to think you're wrong, some people are going to think you're right, everybody's going to have their own thoughts, but I love the fact that, for the best part of the community, we can have conversations and we can appreciate everybody's views. So again, thank you for everybody that's awesome every week and drops a comment and, likes to have that conversation with me. From the YouTube algorithm perspective, it really helps, the channel get seen and push out to more people, which it doesn't cost anybody any money to do that. It's just a case of subscribing to the channel and dropping a comment, and it is me that gets to the replies. So throughout the week I always do try my best to get to everybody, And yeah, it helps. And look, if you listen on one of the podcast platforms like Apple Music, Amazon Music, feel free to come over to YouTube as well, which is youtube.com/MMA Play 365. And again, drop a comment onto this video. Tell me who you're betting on. Tell me if we disagree or if we do agree, and any thoughts that you have. Always happy to listen and have a conversation. So thank you to you guys. And one more time, if you want to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler, everything super affordable, $5 for one event, $10 a month, or if you want to take advantage on our annual offer, it's $99 for a full 12 months. So again, super cheap, super affordable, helps you win that money back as quickly as possible that you pay with us, so then you can start profiting on top of your bets. And that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.